Hi everyone, hope you're well. Phil's asked me to do a little summary of my John Keats lessons that I've done on the poem Lamia and just some of the things that I've done for them. So I'm just going to run you through some of those now. It's been a fantastic for me, the joint planning that we do in English, which has allowed Kim and Anna and Fiona to do some poems and give them to me, and then I've done the same vice versa as well. And I think we've really benefited from that, definitely, especially in this lockdown situation. I think the main thing that I've done with my lessons is just try to make them as much like my actual lessons as I can, but just in a new format, in a different medium, basically. So there's lots of kind of intense periods of study, really kind of high level academic stuff on the poetry, which is quite hard, really, followed by just terrible jokes. Absolutely awful jokes, the kind of thing that I'll be making in person, just interspersed really to keep it lively and fresh, and kind of the worse they are the better the lesson is, I think, really. And it's just helped to, I don't know, keep them awake, keep it a little bit lively. So I'll just talk through some of the things that I've done perhaps, and show you a few examples, and maybe you can have a go at a couple of things if you wanted to yourself. Okay? This poem, Lamia by John Keats, is a really complicated one, so it made me think before I started, how did I want to approach it? It's a big poem that I've always been a little bit scared of, really, in the past. It's absolutely massive and a little bit bonkers, too. So it made me really stop and think, how do I want to go about this? How can I teach them kind of a big, scary poem in this unusual medium? So I thought, I'll just go through the way that I normally teach stuff. So connect to what they already know, create a framework for what they're going to learn, guide and model them through it, then do the intent study, and then that reflection phase, like most periods of study, really, but there you go. I think I realised quite early on that it was quite good for them to hear and kind of see their teacher a little bit, so I interspersed some of these videos with the screencast talking over the top type thing. I don't have a very good laptop, so I just took a little bit of time to kind of learn the amount of time it takes to upload and download stuff, and in between I'll go and do something else and stuff. So I was just very much kind of learning along the way, and then just gradually like getting a little bit better at understanding like where to look in the camera, because I was just looking over here for most of the first bits, which people pointed out was a little bit weird. I'm not really in the kind of social media YouTube type world normally, but anyway, I got used to it really. I've started putting things like that in the background, which I've just pretended is always up in my house and things, and then gradually just done silly things with the poem as well, which has been quite fun, hopefully. A decent chunk of the lessons was, of course, an intense study of the poem with annotation, but because this is massive, it ran to probably about 3 hours of pure annotation. So, of course, I split that up a lot with lots of other tasks and bits and bobs. For the annotation section, I used the voiceover screencast type thing that a lot of people I know have been using to just be able to record your screen and have the voice over the top, and that works, pretty well. Breaking up those lessons and showing them how to revise and process their learning, I've used a lot of Triptycho resources, which obviously look great when you're doing it yourself. I've given them the links on the PowerPoint so they can play it themselves, or they can kind of watch me play it, I guess, and use that as a starting point for discussion, debate, that kind of thing. Just spent literally like 2 minutes recording like the worst Pictionary ever, so much so that I had myself crying with laughter at how bad my drawing is. I think the visual gags has been one thing that the students have liked. I say, when you're learning this poem, you have to keep your tragedy hat on. So I obviously put a hat on that had the word tragedy on. And that recurs quite a few times over the different lessons. I got all my random hats out in the house and just put that on. And I've had students send me their tragedy hats that they've made via email as well, which is great. You can't summarise a poet like John Keats by using just one technique, but he has some favourite techniques that crop up time and time again, which will help students to understand how he writes. His main one is contrasts, because his life was all about contrasts of life and death and love and despair and things like that as well. His main one is contrast that he loves uses, as I say. So I created a little jingle which I just slotted into the video every time there was a contrast, with the aid of a tiny little musical interlude. I always think that variation is the key to a good normal lesson anyway, really. So I've just tried to create that variation within my online lessons on YouTube. Perhaps easier doing it that way than kind of live via Teams for me, but anyway, so yeah, just a mixture really. Well, it is training day. Anyone who's seen the Media Studies Department brilliant parody-style videos that we've done over the last, 15 years will know that I love doing that kind of stupid stuff, and the kids quite enjoy it as well. So the parody-style video that follows now is Crash the Wedding by Apollonius, based on the original song by Busted, you might know and remember, SingStar classic back in the day. Anyway, Apollonius is a character who's a philosopher. He represents reason in the poem, and he turns up uninvited to Lamia's wedding and stares at her and reveals that she's actually a snake. She actually is a snake. She was transformed by the god Hermes into a woman's form. Okay, so that gives you a bit of context. Hopefully it might make a tiny bit of sense as you watch it. Apologies for the singing in advance. I'm so rushed off my feet, looking for Corinth Street. So much I need to say, not sorry that it's on their wedding day. 'Cause she's a serpent sea, from Greek mythology. She's always hated me, because I represent philosophy. Serpentine, and I'm glad I crashed the wedding. 'Cause Lysias was forgetting. He could have been a clever kid and noticed that she slept, but it's the best thing that I ever did. 'Cause no love lasts forever. They couldn't be together. I wish it never met her. Now looking back, I'm glad I crashed the wedding. If nothing else, it's been a kind of fascinating record of my lockdown hair. It's that kind of terrible joke, really, that's just got me through. For my own amusement as much as anything else. Sometimes I just think the other teachers are my audience, but we've had some nice feedback from the students as well, I have to say. So thanks all.